Have you ever thought about what it would be like to spend your golden years living with your children and grandchildren? It sounds like a dream come true: warm family dinners, constant companionship, and the comfort of being surrounded by loved ones. But before you make that decision, there's a lot to consider. In this video, we're going to explore the hidden challenges that come with moving in with your family and why maintaining your independence might be the best choice for a happy and fulfilling old age. Stick around until the end to discover the key strategies that can help you enjoy your later years on your terms, while still staying connected with those you love. Before we begin, I would appreciate it if you like this video. You can help me continue to spread the old age lesson. If you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like this video, please comment number 1. If you don't like it, comment number 0 to let me know so I can make a better video for you. Now let's get started. As you age, regardless of how loving and respectful your children are, it's often wiser to maintain your independence rather than move in with them. While a brief visit can bring joy and strengthen family bonds, living together for an extended period might not be the best choice. Many seniors, understandably, worry about who will care for them in times of illness or when loneliness sets in, leading them to consider moving in with their children. When advised against this, they often respond, "Every family is different, and some children are more caring than others." And thus they choose to live with the child they believe to be the most devoted. However, even if your child is extraordinarily caring, it is still advisable to preserve your own space. A short stay can be enjoyable, but over time the dynamics may shift and the arrangement could become challenging. Miss D's experience sheds light on this. "I have spent my entire life in the countryside working on a farm with my hands in the soil. My husband and I had to leave school early due to financial hardships and were married young. We were blessed with 2 children, a boy and a girl. Both bright and eager to learn. Wanting to give them a better life than we had, we toiled day and night to support their education. They didn't disappoint us. Our son went to university, and our daughter followed, both excelling in their studies and earning scholarships. After graduating, they secured good jobs in the city, and with their busy lives and the vibrancy of youth, they seldom returned home. My husband and I remained in the countryside, managing our lives without placing any burden on our children. When they visited during the holidays, the house would fill with laughter and life, but when they couldn't come, we didn't mind. Everyone has their path to follow, and as long as they are healthy, happy, and thriving, that is enough for us. When our son married and our daughter found a husband, we felt a deep sense of fulfillment as parents, knowing we had completed our responsibilities. Years passed, and my husband fell ill and eventually passed away. The house felt emptier, and I sometimes thought about moving in with one of my children. They both offered, out of love and concern, but I hesitated. I knew they had their own lives and their own families to care for. I didn't want to disrupt their routines or impose on their space. In the end, I decided to stay in my home, where my memories were, where I felt most at peace. I visit my children often, and they visit me, but I am grateful that I maintained my independence. I think it's important for both parents and children to have their own space, to allow each other the freedom to live their lives fully. When my daughter-in-law became pregnant with her first child, it was only natural for her to have concerns about the delivery process. My son reached out to me with an urgent plea: "Mom, could you come and help us out? My wife is due in a few days and I feel completely unprepared to care for a new mother. A mother's presence is so comforting during childbirth, and unfortunately my wife's mother has passed away." Moved by my love for my son, I quickly rearranged my schedule and took the earliest bus I could find to the city. My son had to go back to work, and when I arrived, my daughter-in-law greeted me with a demeanor that was neither particularly warm nor cold. She simply said, "My husband worries too much. Giving birth today isn't like it was in the past. With modern advancements, if you have the means, you can hire professionals to care for both mother and child at the hospital. He doesn't need to trouble you." Given that she had only visited the countryside a few times since becoming part of our family, once when my husband was seriously ill, and another time during the last Lunar New Year, our relationship had remained somewhat distant. We hadn't had the opportunity to build a strong bond or truly understand one another. I gently told her, "If taking care of you is a bother, then it seems you don't see me as your mother." She fell silent and quickly changed the subject. Thankfully, her delivery went smoothly, and my grandson was born healthy and strong. In the initial days following the birth, when her recovery was still painful, I did my best to support her. I even stayed up at night when her milk hadn't come in yet, doing whatever I could to help. As someone from the countryside, accustomed to simpler ways of life, I was adapting to modern times without being too rigid. When caring for the baby, I always sought her input, as it was crucial for her to be involved, given that she was the one who had just given birth. I was mindful to avoid any potential friction, respecting that each generation has its methods of raising children. A few days later, as she began to move around more comfortably, she took over all the household chores, including cooking and caring for the baby. Despite my encouragement for her to rest and take it easy, she responded, "Science today is far more advanced than in your time when people were so cautious. Sometimes being overly cautious can do more harm than good." If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Late one night, I was jolted awake by the sound of my son and daughter-in-law arguing. Their voices, though muffled, were unmistakably filled with tension. I could hear my daughter-in-law's frustration. "I told you we needed to hire help, but you refused to listen. Instead, you insisted on having your mother come stay with us. She's from the countryside and her way of doing things is so different from mine. I can't stand how she questions me about everything as if I'm incapable of handling things myself. I'd rather spend money on a maid than deal with this." Their argument continued with such volume that it even disturbed the baby, who began to cry. I wanted to step in and defuse the situation, but I hesitated, unsure of how to approach the conflict without making things worse. That night, sleep eluded me. I was left alone with my thoughts and a growing realization my daughter-in-law wasn't comfortable with the idea of living with her mother-in-law, despite our previously smooth interactions. Perhaps there were underlying issues she hadn't voiced or wasn't comfortable sharing. It dawned on me that, while I was willing to stay as long as needed, my presence might not be as welcome as I had hoped. Meanwhile, back at home, I had left my husband to manage everything on his own, handling chores and cooking without my help. It struck me that managing a household alone might be more challenging for him than it would be for me. Additionally, I knew from experience that extended cohabitation often led to the magnification of minor irritations into major conflicts. The following morning, I rose early, gathered my belongings, and prepared breakfast for everyone. As I set the table, I noticed my daughter-in-law's eyes were puffy, likely from a night of crying after the argument. My son, usually so upbeat, was unusually quiet as he ate his breakfast. I decided to address the situation delicately. "I heard your argument last night, and it deeply saddened me," I said softly. "I came here to help, not create any discord. If my presence is causing discomfort, I'm more than willing to return home. Honestly, I don't feel entirely at ease here myself. For us older folks, there's no place like home. Besides, there's plenty of work waiting for me back in the countryside. And your father struggles to manage things alone." My son looked up and replied, "My wife is young and sometimes speaks in a way that's not ideal. Please don't hold it against her. Stay a little longer, at least until the baby is a month old, and then you can go." My daughter-in-law remained silent, her expression unreadable. I responded gently, "It seems she is already recovered and is managing fine. If needed, you can always hire additional help. When the baby is a bit stronger, please bring him to visit his grandfather." On my way home, my phone buzzed with a message from my daughter-in-law. "I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused you. If I've done anything wrong, please forgive me. Once the baby is stronger, we'll bring him to visit you and Dad." Reading her message was a relief and eased the tension I had been carrying. In-laws and parents living together should generally be avoided unless necessary. It is often more beneficial to maintain separate households and visit each other occasionally. Children should make the effort to bring their kids to visit their grandparents when their schedules allow. Just as rivers and seas have their distinct paths and joys, maintaining separate living spaces helps everyone enjoy their own lives more fully and without unnecessary conflicts. This approach fosters happiness by preventing misunderstandings and grudges that can arise from close quarters living. In Western culture, the traditional expectation is that parents are responsible for their children primarily until they reach the age of 18. After this point, young adults are expected to move out, assume responsibility for their finances, and manage their lives independently. Many Westerners begin renting their own homes or taking on mortgage payments, which gradually become part of their financial responsibilities. This arrangement allows parents to focus on their well-being, pursue personal interests, travel, and enjoy their middle and later years with greater freedom and less financial burden. Conversely, Eastern cultures often emphasize a different dynamic where parents continue to provide support and protection for their children well into adulthood. Even after children have established their own families, parents in many Asian societies feel a continued responsibility to offer financial support and take care of their grown children, their children-in-law, and their grandchildren. This ongoing support can sometimes lead to a dependency that may inhibit the children's financial independence and personal growth. Navigating relationships with one's children can be manageable, but there's no guarantee that relationships with children-in-law will be equally harmonious. While concerns about children being ungrateful are less prevalent, worries about potential conflicts arising from in-laws' influence are more significant. Living together can exacerbate these issues, and once conflicts develop, they can be challenging to resolve. In some cases, relationships can become strained to the point where family members find it difficult to interact constructively. Therefore, if you are over 60, it's often advisable to live separately from your children and in-laws. This arrangement minimizes the chances of conflict and maintains a positive relationship. Short visits are preferable, as extended stays can lead to increased tensions. The goal is to enjoy each other's company without the stress that living together can sometimes bring. Keeping this balance ensures that relationships remain healthy and fulfilling for all parties involved. The most profound regret of Mr. N's life, at 69 years old, is the decision to sell their cherished countryside home and relocate to the city to live with their children. Mr. N, who had been a dedicated middle school teacher along with his wife, recounts how their move from the serene countryside to the bustling city, driven by the best intentions, led to unforeseen complications. Mr. N and his wife had 2 sons who, after graduating from college in the city, chose to remain there for their careers. As the years went by, the cost of living in the city soared, leaving their sons struggling with expensive and cramped rental housing. When Mr. N and his wife retired about a decade ago, they had saved approximately $50,000, which they initially intended to use for their children's future. Observing their son's challenges, Mr. N proposed using these savings to purchase a small plot of land in the suburbs, thinking it would provide a stable and affordable housing solution for them. They managed to buy a 40-meter plot of land and built a modest house on it, hoping this gesture would ease their son's housing difficulties. Initially, the arrangement seemed promising. Their eldest son married, and not long after, the second son followed suit. Yet, despite their efforts, the distance from the city center made the suburban home less practical for their sons, who preferred to stay close to their workplaces. The sons considered selling the suburban property but decided against it, as they would lose a significant portion of its value. Instead, Mr. N and his wife held on to it, hoping it would eventually serve as an inheritance for their children. As time passed and their sons' jobs became less stable, the arrival of grandchildren added to the family's demands. Mr. N and his wife found themselves splitting their time between their sons' homes, with Mr. N caring for one grandchild at his eldest son's house and his wife caring for the other at the second son's place. Despite living in the same city, the couple only managed to see each other once a month. The logistical challenges of renting and the increased responsibility of grandparenting led their children to suggest a more permanent solution. They proposed selling the family home in the countryside and moving their parents into the city to live with them. Despite the offer being motivated by their children's desire to provide support, the arrangement was not ideal. Each son worked in different parts of the city and neither wanted to accommodate their parents in their homes. Eventually, Mr. N and his wife decided to sell the countryside house, along with the suburban plot, for a combined total of $80,000. They divided the proceeds between their 2 sons, who each used the funds to purchase small apartments of their own. While Mr. N and his wife were pleased that their children now had stable homes, they were left with the bittersweet realization that their dream of a peaceful retirement in their beloved countryside home had slipped away. The decision, made with the hope of providing for their children, had unintentionally led to a life of compromises and regrets as they navigated the complexities of living apart from each other in the city. However, their happiness was short-lived. The couple soon found themselves entangled in conflicts between their daughters-in-law and between the daughters-in-law and Mrs. N. Faced with escalating tensions, Mr. N and his wife had no choice but to move in with their eldest son, whose 70-square-meter apartment had 2 bedrooms. Although this arrangement provided some relief, Mr. N felt increasingly cramped and uneasy living with his children. The situation deteriorated further after his wife passed away. Mr. N's greatest regret is that his wife, who succumbed to lung cancer 4 years ago, did not have the opportunity to spend her final days in the comfort of their home. Despite being close to the hospital in the city, she felt profoundly lonely because the distance prevented family and friends from visiting. She often lay facing the wall, yearning to return to the countryside. Though relatives from their hometown wanted to visit, they refrained from doing so out of concern that they might burden the grandchildren. In her last days, she was hospitalized, and despite her strong desire to be at home for her remaining time, she was tormented by the thought of being a burden to her children. She confided to Mr. N, "If only we had set aside some of our assets and kept a small piece of land in the countryside, this wouldn't have been so painful." Reflecting on those times brings Mr. N to tears. He believes that had they stayed in the countryside, his wife might not have spent her last days alone. Now, residing with his eldest son, he feels a deep sense of loneliness. The grandchildren are preoccupied with school and visit infrequently, and his sons are too consumed with their work to spend quality time with him. In the evenings, Mr. N often finds himself sitting in the apartment lobby, contemplating the possibility of ending up like his wife, longing for the company of family and friends in their ancestral home. He deeply regrets having sold their family home in the countryside to move to the city with his children. The reality is that many elderly people desire to be close to their children, and children often wish for their parents to be in the city for convenience. Yet, this arrangement can lead to heartbreaking outcomes. Some people believe that providing material support is sufficient to demonstrate filial piety. However, material possessions are just one facet of care. What matters more is offering genuine care and love. Sometimes all that elderly parents need are a few kind words or a simple conversation, but children often overlook this. If you find these stories moving and they inspire you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback is important to us. Thank you for your valuable time. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. The dividing land among the children. Today I had a poignant meeting with Ms. L, a client who is grappling with illness and the need to sell some land to cover her medical expenses. As I left her home, I couldn't shake off the heavy thoughts that lingered. Ms. L, now in her early 70s, has faced significant challenges since her husband passed away nearly a decade ago. Together, they had worked tirelessly, saving diligently to buy land. They aimed to provide a secure future for their 2 sons, ensuring each son had a comfortable home and leaving behind several parcels of land for the future. However, the reality of their sacrifices came crashing down when her husband fell ill and subsequently died. The couple had invested almost everything they had into acquiring the land, leaving Ms. L with limited savings and no pension. The very efforts they made to ensure their children's prosperity inadvertently contributed to Ms. L's financial vulnerability. Following her husband's death, she began experiencing various chronic health issues, further complicating her situation. In an attempt to secure her sons' futures and ease her burden, Ms. L decided to give them additional land beyond the properties they already owned. She allocated more land to her elder son, who had been living with her, thinking it was a fair arrangement given his proximity and support. However, this decision sparked discord. The elder son felt entitled to more due to the sacrifices he had made, while the younger son resented the perceived inequity and felt that his share was insufficient. The familial tensions didn't stop there. Both sons had married women who contributed to the strain in the family dynamics. The elder son's family moved L to a smaller, less comfortable part of their home, restricting her access to food and making it harder for other relatives to visit. The younger son, feeling slighted by the land distribution, distanced himself and ceased providing care for his mother. As L's health continued to decline and her loneliness grew, she considered moving into a nursing home. However, when she proposed selling some land to fund this option, her elder son and daughter-in-law vehemently opposed the idea, despite the land rightfully belonging to L. After our meeting, I reviewed the documents related to the land. They were only copies, as the originals were held by her elder son. The land remaining in L's name held enough value to support her for years, but legally she couldn't sell it without the consent of her sons, as they were all considered equal heirs. Seeing her reaction, breaking down in tears, feeling helpless and regretful, was heartbreaking. It became clear that L's fears of future disputes were well-founded. Even after her passing, her sons are likely to continue battling over the inheritance she and her husband painstakingly accumulated. The lack of formal documentation regarding the land division and the fact that it is still in L's and her husband's names could lead to prolonged conflict. This situation reminds me of a friend of mine who has worked diligently all his life to provide for his children. Even in his 60s, he is still working hard to pay off the debt incurred from buying land for his sons. While his elder son enjoys a comfortable life in a house built by him, my friend's old age and health remain precarious. When I voiced my concerns, he responded with a selfless optimism: "We live for our children. Once the debt is cleared, we'll be all right. When we're old, we won't need much. Our children will take care of us in return." His dedication is admirable, but I worry about the future he envisions. His story, much like L's, underscores the profound sacrifices parents make, often at great personal cost. Story 2. In our family, there was a cousin who once faced significant hardship. Years ago, she relocated with her 2 children to the southeast region, starting from scratch with very limited resources. They managed to survive on a tight budget, and as time passed, her children grew up. Her son eventually got married, and after years of hard work clearing land, her most valuable asset became 2 hectares of forested land. Believing that her children were now capable adults and that she would no longer need much for herself, she decided to divide the land between them, giving each hectare to one of her children to farm. However, her attempt to live with each child, even for short periods, led to increasing tensions and eventual conflicts. The friction between family members became too much to bear, and she ended up moving to a small, dilapidated shack on the edge of the property, where she had to take up various odd jobs to scrape by. As the years passed and her health declined, life became increasingly difficult for her. She struggled with illness and harsh living conditions, barely making ends meet. Then, a few years ago, the value of the land surged. Her son seized the opportunity to sell both plots, earning a substantial sum that helped him pay off debts and move to a new place to start over. The new owner of the land, while demolishing the old house, was considerate enough to allow her to remain in the small shack at the periphery of the property. When I visited her once, standing in that rundown shack and witnessing her worn appearance, I felt a profound mixture of sadness and frustration. It was difficult not to harbor some resentment towards her son. While it is true that they still care for their children, their financial struggles persist. As she aged, her personality had become more challenging, her health had deteriorated, and her son had grown increasingly indifferent. Her daughter-in-law's attitude was even more disheartening. However, it's also evident that if she had planned better for her old age or retained some of the land for herself, her current situation could have been far more comfortable. Her story highlights the importance of thoughtful planning for the future, particularly in old age. Despite the hardships and familial conflicts, she faced a more strategic approach to managing her assets, and preparing for her later years might have provided her with a better quality of life. Story 3. I once knew a family with nearly 10 children. and they owned a substantial amount of land. As the parents approached old age, they decided to divide the land among their children. The siblings were diverse, each differing in age, career, and financial stability. Some were quite affluent, while others struggled to make ends meet. In the earlier days, when the land was more readily available and their financial outlook seemed secure, the parents divided the land with little foresight. The allocation was haphazard. The oldest son received a plot. When he married, another son was given a parcel just large enough to park his vehicle, and yet another, who was well-to-do, was granted a sizable plot to build a grand estate. The parents focused on immediate needs and, without considering long-term implications, did not foresee the potential for future discord. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. As time passed and the parents aged, the ramifications of their decisions became apparent. The division of the land, done without much thought, led to resentment among the siblings. Those who lived far away or received smaller parcels felt a sense of injustice, which fueled conflicts within the family. This discord even extended to how they measured their responsibilities towards their aging parents, often viewing these responsibilities through the lens of the land they had been allocated. Unintentionally, the parents had sown the seeds of future disputes by their seemingly straightforward decisions. There was also a housekeeper who shared a poignant story about her own family. Her parents had 12 children, 8 boys and 4 girls, and despite living in a small village, they owned considerable land. Her father died young, leaving her mother to manage everything alone. The mother, with remarkable determination, built 18 small rental units, keeping 4 for herself to run a small business. Yet, despite her efforts, the sons, who had each been given land of their own, became increasingly indifferent. The daughters, after marriage, moved away, leaving their mother to handle the rental business single-handedly. Her visits from her sons were rare and usually limited to special occasions like New Year's. The mother continued to manage the rental units as best as she could until her passing. Her death triggered a bitter dispute among the sons, each one claiming a share of the property. After years of conflict, the entire estate was sold off, with the proceeds further divided. These stories offer profound lessons. They highlight the complexities of distributing land among children, considering fairness, and determining the right timing. For parents with ample resources and a comfortable pension, holding onto a piece of land can provide a secure and enjoyable retirement or a financial cushion in times of need. For those in less stable financial situations, the decisions are more challenging. As children, when we live with our parents, we often fail to consider the future implications of such decisions. However, as we age and reflect on the sacrifices our parents made for us, it becomes crucial to approach these matters with empathy and foresight. Responsibility should not be measured solely by material possessions, but should be guided by genuine care and love. True filial piety involves showing respect and support that goes beyond mere financial or material considerations. As we wrap up, take a moment to reflect on what you've learned about the importance of balancing independence with family connections in your later years. What insights did you gain that resonated with you the most? Is there a piece of advice or a perspective that you'll bring into practice in your own life or share with someone you care about? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please share one thing you've learned today in the comments below. Engaging with this topic is just the beginning. By taking action and planning for your future, you can ensure that your golden years are not only comfortable but also fulfilling and true to your values. Remember, the decisions you make now will shape your experience in the years to come. If you found this video valuable, please leave your comment below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on more content that empowers you to make the best choices for your life. Your support helps us continue bringing you the information you need to live your best life. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.